Don't worry if you don't have hiragana perfectly memorized in a week. You've got a long time. And I'm also very, very pro writing phonetics if it helps you for the first few weeks. Having said that, you will read Japanese better when you get the hiragana down. Like, you will just get the pronunciation better. Like, whenever I see phonetics, I naturally want to kind of make them a bit English. So, really, really do try and get the hiragana down. But don't worry if it takes some time. Okay, like we said a moment ago, hiragana are basically a little alphabet, kind of. Like, they're not one, but they act similar to our alphabet. Each character represents a sound, and unlike in English, character placement, keep in mind I use the word rarely affects the way it's pronounced. There's a few situations where it might make like a longer sound here, a longer sound there, but hiragana just kind of like stays with its phonetics, like a, I, u, e, o, ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, wherever you put it. Makes it nice and easy to say. Okay, our first hiragana is a. It's three strokes. It's kind of pronounced like ka. I say that maybe not with a British accent. Ka. It looks very, very similar to o, to the point where even I sometimes like I'll read it really fast. I'll read or something like that. I guess it looks a bit similar to me as well, the bottom part. So try not to confuse it for either of these. My example word for a is akachan, which means baby. Akachan. The second hiragana is I. It's kind of said like ki, the end of ki, I. It's two strokes long. I think this one can look a bit different when it's handwritten. I see some people kind of like move it, maybe like you might see it looking a bit more like that, or not that looks very different. You might see it more like that or something like that. So there's a few characters it can look like. For example, ri or ko. I see a lot of people think it looks like ko. Even if you accidentally just kind of bring it around a bit too much, it just looks very, very similar to ko. So make sure you get it at the right angle. Yeah, I. My example word for I is iku, which means to go. Iku. We could also have ichi, which means one. Ichi. We then have u, it's two strokes. Kind of looks a bit like I guess. Actually, it looks a bit more like e, which I haven't put on its similar hiragana. It's said kind of like kung fu, like the end of that u. My example word for u is utau, which means to sing. Another example is uta, which is song. This character is e. It's pronounced kind of like egg, e. Kind of like it. I put it in there. Actually, about halfway through this video, you're going to notice I give up a bit on the pronunciations, like using English words, because there's a lot that just don't sound right. Like, that's the closest I can get them, but they still don't sound perfect. It looks a bit like ooh, just without like the top bit, blah, blah, without the kind of curve. Also, this little bit, I guess, is a bit different. I don't know. But my example word for e is eki. E is eki. This means train station. This character is o. It looks very, very similar to a. A being down here. What I will say is when I'm writing this character, something as a beginner that I noticed I would do a lot is I would forget that little third stroke, maybe because I'm very used to writing a. I would just kind of forget that there is a third stroke on there, so remember the third stroke. My example word for o is otosan, which means father or somebody else's father. Ka. Here is an example where I just kind of give up on the pronunciation a bit. It said like ka. Ka. It's the one thing I'll say with this one is stroke order is that stroke first and then that. I think it's very, very tempting to do the line first. It doesn't make too much of a difference, but yeah. My example word for cut is kaku, which is to write. Ki is four strokes. When it is written, when it's typed sometimes, it will look like three strokes. So occasionally you will see it like that, specially typed. But when you are handwriting it, you do it in four strokes. It's said like ki. It kind of looks very similar to sa, just with an extra line, and even a bit like chi. So you might get those ones confused. A lot of people compare ki to looking a bit like a key. So maybe that will help. My example word for ki is kiku, which means to listen. Is one stroke, kind of pronounced like ku. Looks a bit similar to she or something. I'd say this one looks kind of unique. I think what I've heard is like it's a cuckoo bird going cuckoo. Ignore that terrible picture. My example word for ku is roku, which means 6. This character is Ke. It looks a bit like ni and a bit like wa. My example word for Ke is kesa, which means this morning. This character is one that I would always write wrong. My teacher, I remember like I tried it so many times, I don't know how, but every single time I wrote it, she'd be like, that is wrong, back when I first started doing it, when I first started studying. So just as a note, apparently this character is hard to get right. It looks a bit different in some typing. I would say it's very common to see it like this in typing. Even that, maybe. And I think where she kept saying I was going wrong is I needed that little flick on the end, and then like that. So just as a note. My example word for ko is koko, which means here. Sa, this character looks a bit like ki, and it kind of looks like a flipped chi. There's a bit of a difference. But when it is typed, it sometimes looks like it's 2 strokes like that. Ignore the fact that my pen on the app I'm using has very little control, so everything I'm writing just looks like I can't write. But this character here, it sometimes looks like it's written with 2 strokes when it's typed. It's not. When you are handwriting it, you need to do it in 3 strokes. 1, 2, 3. My example word for sa is sakura, which means cherry blossom. This character is nice and easy. She has 1 stroke. I think I often hear people compare it to like, oh, she has long hair. Smile. I actually almost like skipped on from this a bit too fast. She is I'm not going to call it a special character, but it pronounces shi, she, not c, she. My example word for she is oishi, which means delicious or tasty. Su, you'll recognize this sound from sushi. I have no clue why it's jumping around a bit there. I think I often hear this one as a person named Sue wearing a hat. So you can imagine this little bit here is her hat. And this is her eye. Smile. It's a bit scary actually. But yeah. My example word for Sue is sushi, which means sushi. This one is se. It's 3 strokes, se. This one I always expected to start with this stroke, but it never does. It never does, as if it can change. But no, it starts 1, 2, 3. My example word for se is sensei, which means teacher. This character here, so, can be written in 2 different ways. They're both animated, so you can see them. Just saying that now, in case you see it like this and you're like, I don't recognize that character at all. It's got two different ways. My example word for so is soko, which is there. This one is also flashing for some reason. I don't know why. But this one is ta. 4 strokes. I don't really have much to say on this one, apart from the fact that the first part of it does look a bit like a T, which might help you remember ta. My example word for ta is takai, which is expensive or tall. This character here, chi, sounds a bit like cheese. It's an exception. It's not T, it's chi. It's very similar to sa and ra. This one is only 2 strokes long, not 3. I think as a beginner, because sa has 3 strokes, it's very, very tempting to make this one 3 strokes as well. But no, just chi, just 2. My example word for chi is chizu, which is map. This character is Su. It's in Tsunami. It's kind of a harder one for I mean, having said that, I think a lot of people kind of recognize how to say this one. It's harder to pick up the difference between Su and Tsu. Tsu. So pronunciation Tsu. It kind of looks a bit like U without its hat, and I think I've heard it described as looking a bit like a tsunami. My example word for tsu is tsuki, which is moon. This one is apparently flashing as well. I don't know why, but this one is te, te, kind of like tennis, I guess. Tennis. It looks a bit like U. It looks a bit more like tsu. My example word for te is tenki, which is weather. This character is to, it's 2 strokes. I've heard this one described as being looking like a to. Again, I don't know why it's flashing. My example word for to is tomodachi, which is friend. This character is na. It's got 4 strokes. It looks a tiny bit like ta, in that it's got this little first T-like character. My example word for na is naka, which is inside. This character is ni, kind of like ni, like my knee. It looks a bit similar to ke and ha. I think I've heard it described as a warrior kneeling by his sword. This can be his little sword. My example word for ni is nichiobi, which is Sunday. It is new. It's also gonna flash. I don't know why. I've heard it described as looking like noodles. Noodles. It looks really, really similar to meh. It kind of looks similar to ne. Kind of looks similar to no. It's got a lot of characters. It's really, no. It's got a lot of characters it's very, very similar to. So have fun with this one. My example word for nu is nugu, which is to take off shoes, clothes, etc. This one also has a lot of characters that look very similar, such as wa, re, nu, etc. But this one is ne, kind of ne, like a horse neigh. No, it's nothing like horse neighing. My example word for ne is neko, which is cat. This character is no. It's one of my favorites because it kind of just looks like an eye. You might have even seen, especially back in the day, like when people like to play around with different characters in different languages to try and make like typed faces and things like that. I think a lot of people tried to use this as an eye, like someone looking that way. So you might recognize it from that. Maybe put notes in there. Easy character. It does look similar to meh and nu. My example word for no is nomu, which is to drink. This character is ha. It's flashing. You might hear it as wa when it is used as a particle. It is only wa when it's used as a particle, and with an exception of konnichiwa and konbanwa. All other times it is ha. If you don't know what I mean by a particle yet, we will do that in a later lesson. But this character is ha. And there's one or two exceptions where you might see it as wa. Um, Kind of looks similar to ke, ni, even. My example word for ha is hachi, which is 8. This character is he, is one stroke. Kind of looks like a smile. I think I've heard it as he is happy, kind of thing. My example word for he is hito, which is person. This character is fu. You might also hear some people say it's who. What I've heard, I think my teacher told me this, is that in Japan they consider this character who, like HU, but when English speakers or even just a lot of people from other countries hear this character, they hear fu. So oftentimes on charts you'll see it as fu, you'll be told to say it as fu, but on some charts it will still say who, because they this character to them is who. So I guess it's just kind of like what different people from different countries hear when listening to this character. I hate this character. I just don't like writing it. I can never make it look good. So it's not my favorite. It's kind of like Kung Fu for pronunciation, Fu. Even Fuji, that starts with this character, Fuji. In fact, perfect example of it. You might occasionally see it written like that. Ignore how terrible this pen control is on this device. Especially in typed font, it might look something more like that. Probably not as bad as that, but yeah, you just might occasionally see this part connected here. I kind of think it looks like a person. My example word for fu is Fuji, which is Mount Fuji. This character is he. Kind of looks a bit like a hill. That doesn't really help because it's the wrong side. Sound. My example word for he is heya, which is room. This character is ho. It's 4 strokes. Looks a bit like ha, just with an extra stroke. This one, for some reason, like I remember it as being in the same row as ha, but ha is at the beginning with 1 line and ho is at the end with 2 lines. I'm not sure if that will help anyone or not, but yeah. Kind of also looks a bit like ma, just without the first stroke. My example word for ho is hon, which is book. A bit like ho without the first stroke, and also the lines, the horizontal lines are a bit lower. It's 3 strokes, ma. My example word for ma is machi, which is town. Mi, this one, again, I don't have much to say on this one. It kind of looks like the letter 4, the number 4, but that's not very helpful for remembering it in any way. My example word for mi is mizu, which is water. So it's mu, kind of like a cow, mooing, mu. Muzukashi, like that word is difficult. It looks a bit like su. I kind of think this one looks a bit like a mug. So I say a bit, that's the little handle there, and we can fill it with some water. This character is me, it's 2 strokes. It looks like nu, it looks like no. I think it's very, very similar for people to get nu and me mixed up, especially at the beginning. As an example word, we're going to have megane, which is glasses. Really bad example word because that is actually written in katakana, but sound-wise, perfect. This character is mo. It is, I don't know, it's 3 strokes long. Kind of looks like ma, just with the the first stroke kind of taking a different turn. My example word for this one is momo, which is peach. This character is ya. It is three strokes. This is also a character that I kind of expect to go like that in the stroke order, but it actually starts with the smaller stroke and then the larger stroke. So yeah, my example word is yakyu, which is baseball. This character is you. I don't have many comments on it in terms of writing. I do really like that this one is so curly. Um, it's two strokes long. My example word for this one is yuki, which means snow. This character is yo. It's also one where you might try and write it like that, but its correct order is actually the horizontal stroke first. I don't have a lot to say about this one either. I guess it kind of looks like a strange Y, if that's any help, but yeah. My example word for this one is yoku, which is often yoku. This character here is ra. It is two strokes. I'm going to use the example word ramen for this one. Ramen is actually a foreign word. It comes from China, so it's written in katakana. So you can't write, I mean, you could technically write ramen with this character, but it would be incorrect to write it with this character. It looks kind of similar to chi, so make sure you do the first stroke above, floating above, so that you don't make it look too much like chi. And it looks a tiny bit similar to sa. This character here is ri. You will occasionally see it written like this. You'll occasionally see it typed more like this. It can make this character a bit harder to recognize if you're not expecting that. It looks a bit tiny bit similar to ro and also ko, just on its side. Even it looks a bit similar to i. So there's a few characters you could get confused with for this one. My example word is ringo, which is apple. Also, just as a note, because we're on the R, when I say pronunciation is like ri, like ri, I've written it here as ri. The R pronunciation, ra, ri, ru, re, etc. It's kind of like an R and an L sound mixed together. It is hard to begin with. For some people, other people are used to this sound in their native language, but for English speakers who haven't studied another language before, getting li right can take a bit of practice, and it'll probably take I think a lot of people go through this kind of like, am I saying it right? Am I saying it embarrassingly wrong? So they don't want to say it. You gotta get it wrong to get it right. So just accept that it might sound wrong to begin with, and then just say it wrong until you get it right. Say it embarrassingly wrong until you kind of say it great. Basically, what I'm saying is don't be afraid to get this one wrong. It is ru. It looks very, very similar to ro. My weird tip for this one, which isn't really a tip, is that ru has this little o in, this little ending o. And that means it's not o. It's not the o one, it's the ru one. So the one that you think should have an o is not or is the ru sound. That might make life a lot harder, or at least now you have some tip for it. Ru, my example word for this one is going to be taberu, which means to eat. This character is re. It looks similar to wa, it looks similar to ne. Really hard to begin with. Re, my example word for re is going to be, this character here is ro. This is the other one that is similar to ru. It ends in an o sound, but it doesn't have this little o here, this letter that looks like o. It actually has more of like an u shape, which should be ru. So basically, the shapes that I would expect are reversed on these two characters. It's one stroke, and my example is going to be roku, which means 6. This character is wa. It's similar hiragana at ne and re, of course. It's the same three. They're a bit confusing for beginners. I don't have a lot to say on this one. I guess the pattern, the second stroke here, kind of looks like a W on its side. So maybe that will help you remember which one. My example word for this is watashi, which is I/me. This character here, I do have a note on. This character is o. It's pronounced o, not wo. Never pronounce this as wo. There is not a single time I can think of that it's ever been wo. But especially as a beginner, and if you're reading phonetics, a lot of the phonetics put it as wo. It's not war, and you will naturally just say war. This character is o. It's always pronounced o, very similar to the hiragana o, as in pronunciation. This character is not in any words, and it's only used as a particle. If you don't know what particle is yet, don't worry, we'll get onto that in the future, but you won't see this in any words. It's only used as like a connective word. This character is very similar to an N in English, so nice and easy. Even just kind of looks like an extended N, maybe a bit like a H, but we'll call it an extended N. Doesn't really have many characters it looks similar to. I chose ri, but I wasn't even 100% sure on that. My example word for this one is going to be ramen. Again, ramen is written with katakana, but in terms of pronunciation, ramen is the perfect example here.